I still remember the sound of the rain hitting the roof that night. My dad had invited his old friend, Officer Cole, to stay at our house for a few days after he'd been injured on duty. I'd heard stories about him for years, the brave cop who once saved my dad's life, but I never imagined how seeing him in person would shake me so deeply. When I arrived, Cole was already there, sitting in the living room in his uniform shirt, his sleeve rolled up to reveal a faint scar. His voice was calm, deep, and carried the kind of authority that made the whole room go still. Yet there was a warmth in his eyes that didn't match the toughness he projected. From that first moment, something in me changed. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I couldn't rest. I got up to grab some water and saw his door slightly open, light spilling through the crack. I hesitated, but something pulled me closer. I knocked gently and stepped inside. He was sitting on the bed, shirtless, his badge and gun resting on the nightstand. He looked up, surprised but not angry, and said words that made my heart race faster than I thought possible. From that moment, everything I thought I knew about boundaries, fear, and desire began to blur. This isn't just a story about attraction. It's about trust, power, and the unexpected ways people enter your life to change it forever. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after that night, make sure you stay until the end, because once you hear how this unfolded, you'll question what love, control, and connection really mean, and how far you'd go to protect the truth that hides behind silence. Talking about how good it felt to have an old friend around again. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my mind kept replaying what had happened the night before. When I'd stepped into Cole's room, I hadn't expected him to be awake, much less to look at me like that. The way his eyes softened when he said, "You shouldn't sneak up on a man like that, kid," wasn't a scolding. It sounded more like a warning mixed with curiosity. And when I froze, too embarrassed to speak, he smiled faintly and said, "You've grown up, huh?" His tone was gentle, but something beneath it made my pulse race. Now, sitting at the breakfast table, I could still feel that same pulse in my neck. My dad poured coffee into 2 mugs, one for me and one for Cole. "Could you take this to him?" he asked. "He's still resting that leg." I hesitated. "Sure," I said, trying not to sound nervous. When I knocked on Cole's door, his voice came from inside, low and steady. "Come in." He was sitting by the window in a plain grey t-shirt, sunlight cutting across his face. The injury, my dad mentioned, was just a bandage around his thigh, barely visible under the fabric of his shorts. He looked up and gave a small grin. "Morning, soldier," I laughed quietly. "I'm not the one with the badge." "Still," he said, his eyes tracing me for a moment too long. "You've got that posture. Like you're trying to hide something, but standing tall anyway." I handed him the coffee. "My dad said you like it black." "Your dad remembers everything," he said, taking the mug. "Except maybe how to slow down when life changes." He looked at me again, longer this time. The silence felt heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it normal again. "So, how's your leg?" He shrugged. "Healing. Been through worse. The bullet didn't hit bone, thank God. I've had closer calls." He paused, his gaze softening. "You don't remember me, do you? From when you were little?" I frowned. "I think I do. You came to the house once, years ago. I remember your uniform. And that you gave me a police coin." His smile widened. "You still have it?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's in my desk drawer. I never forgot that day." He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Neither did I." The way he said it made my chest tighten. There was something in his voice, a quiet admission, maybe nostalgia, maybe something else entirely. I felt my breath catch, and I looked away before he noticed. "I should let you rest," I said quickly, heading toward the door. But his voice stopped me. "Hey, Luke," he said softly. "You ever feel like some people come back into your life for a reason?" I turned around slowly. "Maybe," he gave a small nod, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah, me too. That day went by in a blur. I helped my dad around the house, repaired some shelves, and tried to ignore the strange warmth lingering in my chest. Every time I caught a glimpse of Cole, walking with a slight limp, talking easily with my dad, laughing in that calm, deep way, It felt like something I wasn't supposed to feel was growing inside me. That evening, the three of us sat outside by the fire pit. My dad brought out beers, and the sky was turning gold. Cole leaned back in his chair, relaxed, but his eyes kept flicking toward me whenever I spoke. It was subtle, but enough to make me feel like there was a secret conversation happening between us, one my dad couldn't hear. At one point, my dad went inside to grab another round. The second the door closed, the atmosphere changed. Cole's voice dropped lower. "You've changed a lot, Luke. You were this quiet kid hiding behind your dad's legs. Now look at you." I smiled nervously. "Guess time does that," he chuckled. "Time, yeah. And experience." For a moment, the firelight reflected in his eyes, and I saw something that made my stomach flip. Admiration. Curiosity, maybe even restraint. "You're staring," I said. Half joking, half defensive. He didn't deny it. "Yeah," he said calmly. "Maybe I am." Before I could react, the sound of my dad's footsteps echoed from the kitchen, breaking whatever tension had built up. Cole leaned back, cleared his throat, and looked toward the flames as if nothing had happened. Later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to that look, that unspoken thing hanging between us. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I'd misread everything. But when I got up to grab some water again, I noticed his door open slightly, just like the night before. This time, he was standing there, waiting. He looked at me with the same calm intensity and said, almost in a whisper, "You keep showing up when I can't stop thinking about you." My heart raced, and I froze. I didn't know what to say, or even what I wanted to happen next. And then he stepped closer, closing the distance between us. His breath warm, his voice low. "If you stay right now," he said, "we both know something's going to change." I didn't move. I couldn't. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a coincidence anymore. Something had started between us. Something neither of us was ready to admit out loud. And just before he turned away, he added one last thing that burned into my mind forever. "Your dad might have saved my life once. But you, Luke, you might be the one who makes me live again." The next morning felt heavier than any before. The air in the house was still, like it was holding its breath with me. My dad had already gone out early for work, leaving only 2 mugs in the sink and a note on the counter that said, "Back by noon. Take care of Cole." I stared at the note longer than necessary, pretending it was just another morning chore. But it wasn't. Everything felt different now, like the house wasn't big enough for both of us, and the silence between us at the table. Cole was in the backyard, leaning against the fence with his crutches beside him, the early light cutting across his shoulders. His shirt clung to his frame, just enough for me to see the shape of his muscles beneath. I tried to look away, but my eyes didn't listen. When he noticed me standing by the sliding door, he smiled. Small, knowing, almost daring. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I answered, stepping outside. The cold morning hit my skin, but his presence made the air feel warmer. He nodded toward the chair beside him. "Sit with me, Luke." I hesitated but sat down anyway. For a while, neither of us said anything. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. The kind of calm that usually felt peaceful now only made my heart beat louder. Finally, he spoke. "About last night." His voice trailed off, low and careful. I swallowed. "Yeah," he looked at me then, really looked. "You came to my door twice. That's not an accident." I felt the words hit harder than they should. "I didn't mean to. I just couldn't sleep." He tilted his head slightly. "Maybe you couldn't sleep because something's keeping you awake." His tone wasn't accusing, just honest. That made it harder to deflect. I met his gaze for a moment before looking down at the ground. "You shouldn't say things like that," I murmured. He gave a quiet laugh. "Maybe I shouldn't, but I've been through enough to know when something's real, even if it's inconvenient." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away. Another part wanted to stay right there, close enough to hear his heartbeat if I leaned in. "Cole," I said softly, "you're my dad's friend." "I know," he smiled faintly, his voice calm. "And you're not a kid anymore." That last part landed differently. I looked at him again, and for the first time, I didn't see my dad's old war buddy. I saw a man sitting in front of me, strong, flawed, tired, but alive in a way that drew me in. He reached for his coffee and took a sip. "I've seen people lose everything in seconds," he said. "That's what makes me notice when something or someone feels like it matters." I tried to breathe normally, but the air was thick. "You're saying that about me?" He chuckled quietly. "I'm saying you shouldn't ignore what's in front of you." The conversation ended there, but the tension didn't. For the rest of the morning, I kept finding him everywhere I turned. In the kitchen, on the porch, in my head. Every glance, every half-smile, every casual brush of his hand near mine was like a spark we both pretended not to see. Around noon, my dad came back, breaking the spell completely. He greeted us like nothing had changed, unaware of the invisible thread pulling at the air between me and Cole. "Luke, help me unload the truck," my dad said. "Sure," I replied, forcing a smile. Cole stood behind us, arms crossed, watching with that calm expression that gave away nothing except his eyes. Every time I glanced at him, he was already looking. Later that day, a small accident happened, something that, in another context, wouldn't have meant much. My dad asked me to help fix a loose shelf in the garage. I grabbed a hammer, climbed a small step stool, and the next thing I knew, the stool slipped. Before I could hit the ground, strong arms caught me, Cole's. His injured leg gave out slightly, but he didn't let go. "You okay?" he asked, his face inches from mine. "I think so," I said, barely breathing. He didn't move. Neither did I. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other, that same quiet, dangerous energy circling between us again. My dad's voice broke through the moment. "Everything good in there?" Cole stepped back instantly, his jaw tightening. "Yeah," he called out, "just dropped something." That night dinner was painfully normal. My dad talked about work while Cole and I stayed mostly silent. Every time our eyes met, it was quick, a secret we couldn't afford to let slip. When my dad went to bed, I sat in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone. Cole came in a few minutes later, leaning against the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just tired." He crossed his arms. "You've been quiet. So have you," he smiled, stepping closer. "I'm trying not to make this harder than it already is." I set my phone down, meeting his gaze. "What is this, Cole?" He exhaled. "It's something that shouldn't be happening." He paused, then added softly, "But it is." Silence filled the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us. I stood up slowly. "Then maybe we should stop pretending we don't feel it." For a moment he didn't move. Then with a quiet intensity, he stepped closer until I could feel his breath again. His eyes searched mine, waiting for something. "Permission, maybe. You sure about that?" he asked. I didn't answer with words. When our hands brushed, it was small, almost innocent, but it sent a rush through me I couldn't explain. I looked up, and for the first time, neither of us looked away. He leaned in just slightly, his voice breaking the silence in a low whisper. "If we cross this line, Luke, there's no going back." "I know," I said. "Maybe I don't want to." The moment hung there, fragile and real, until the sound of a creaking floorboard upstairs reminded us both that the world outside this room still existed. He stepped back, his jaw tight again, his eyes full of something I couldn't name. "Go to bed." "Luke," he said quietly, "before I make a mistake I can't take back." I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't a mistake, but the words caught in my throat. I watched him walk away, his shadow disappearing down the hall. And that's when I realized the line between right and wrong was already gone. The next few days passed in a haze, full of glances that lasted too long and silences that said too much. Cole tried to act normal, but I could tell it was an act. He spent most of his time outside, fixing little things around the yard, walking on his recovering leg, keeping himself busy so he wouldn't have to look at me. But when he did look, it was never casual. That Friday evening, my dad got called in to work late. There had been a string of break-ins at a nearby store, and they needed extra hands for security review. Cole insisted on staying behind, saying his leg still wasn't ready for long patrols. When my dad left, the house felt bigger and emptier than usual. I was on the couch pretending to watch a movie when Cole walked in, barefoot, wearing a black t-shirt that fit a little too well. He carried 2 beers, tossing one gently toward me. "You look like you could use this," he said. I caught it, smiling nervously. "You sure your pain meds mix with this?" He chuckled. "One won't kill me. Besides, I've had worse nights. We clinked bottles." The sound echoed softly through the quiet room. For a while we just talked, about everything but what mattered. About the weather, the news, my college plans. But every now and then our eyes met and the room seemed to shrink around us. The kind of silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, alive. When the movie ended, he got up and stretched, grimacing slightly as his leg tensed. "A damn thing still aches," he muttered. I stood too. "You should probably sit down." He gave a half-smile. "You offering to take care of me, kid?" I swallowed. "Maybe." Something in his expression shifted, softer but not playful anymore. "You keep saying things like that, and one of us is going to regret it." "Maybe not," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned away, walking toward the kitchen. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Then tell me," I said, following him. "Tell me what's so dangerous about this." He leaned against the counter, his jaw tightening. "I'm older. I'm your dad's friend. I'm supposed to protect people, not—" He stopped himself, staring at the floor. "Not what?" I asked. He looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not want this." The air between us froze. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. "You don't make this easy, Luke." "I'm not trying to," I said. And before I could stop myself, I added, "You make me feel safe." He exhaled sharply, turning his face slightly away, but not enough to break eye contact. "That's the problem," he said. "I shouldn't be the one doing that." "Then why do you?" I asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer. Instead, he placed his beer down, reached out and brushed his thumb along the side of my face. Tentative, almost afraid. The touch burned through me like fire. "You should go to bed," he murmured. "I can't," I said. He looked at me again, searching for something. Doubt, hesitation, maybe permission. "You don't know what you're asking for." I took a slow breath. "Then show me what I don't know." That was all it took. He closed the distance in one step, and suddenly the world outside the kitchen disappeared. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me there, close enough to feel his breath against my skin. For a moment, neither of us moved. It was like the universe was waiting to see who would cross the line first. Then he whispered, "You're shaking." "So are you," I said, and then everything blurred. His lips brushed my temple, light at first, cautious, restrained, before finding the corner of my mouth. The kiss wasn't desperate or wild. It was slow, hesitant, filled with all the tension we'd been denying for days. When he pulled back, he looked conflicted, almost angry at himself. "I shouldn't have done that." I stared at him, breathless. "But you did." He closed his eyes for a second, rubbing the back of his neck. "You have no idea how bad I've wanted to since that night you opened my door. Then why fight it?" "Because it's wrong," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Because your dad trusts me. Because this," he gestured between us, "this shouldn't exist." "But it does," I whispered. That silence again, that unbearable, beautiful quiet, where both of us knew words wouldn't fix anything. He turned away, gripping the counter. "I've been through war zones, Luke. I've seen what happens when people lose control." I stepped closer. "And what happens when they stop pretending?" He spun around, his eyes burning with something fierce and conflicted. "They get hurt." "I'm not scared," I said. "Maybe you should be." The air was thick enough to suffocate us both. He took a step toward me, then stopped, torn between restraint and desire. "You don't understand what I am," he said quietly. "Then help me understand," I replied. He exhaled shakily. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not when it feels like this." And for the second time that night, he gave in. His hands found my shoulders, pulling me in until there was no space left between us. The warmth of his breath, the trembling of his fingers, it was raw, human, terrifyingly real. When he finally broke away, he rested his forehead against mine. "This has to stay between us," he whispered. "No one can know." "Not your dad, not anyone?" I nodded. "I know, but deep down I also knew something else, something he hadn't said yet." This wasn't just a secret. It was the start of something that would change both of us. He looked at me, eyes soft now, full of something almost tender. "Go get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be different." I smiled faintly. "Promise?" He gave a short laugh, quiet, bittersweet. "I don't make promises I can't keep." As I walked to my room, I could still feel the weight of his touch lingering on my skin, and his words echoing in my mind. Different. I didn't know if he meant better or worse. But I knew one thing. Nothing about us would ever be the same again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, too bright for how heavy my head felt. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Cole, the way he'd looked at me in the kitchen, the way his hand had trembled when it touched my face, the way he'd whispered that no one could ever know. I kept telling myself it was just a moment, one night, one kiss. But the truth was heavier. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a door opening to something that couldn't easily be shut. When I came downstairs, he was already up, dressed in his uniform again. The badge caught a flash of sunlight, almost blinding. He was sitting at the table reading a report, pretending not to notice me. "Morning," I said quietly. "Morning." His tone was steady, too steady. For a minute I stood there, waiting for him to say something else, anything, but he didn't. So I grabbed a glass of water and sat across from him. "How's your leg?" I asked, just to break the silence. He looked up, meeting my eyes for a moment that felt like an eternity. "We're better," that was it. One word, cold, distant. It was like the man from last night had vanished. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Good!" He looked back at the papers, but I could see the muscle in his jaw tighten, a tell he didn't realize he had. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. "Cole, are we just going to pretend nothing happened?" His eyes flicked up again, sharp this time. "Yes," he said simply. That hit harder than I expected. "Why?" "Because it was a mistake," he said, his tone low but firm. "We crossed a line, Luke, and if your dad ever—" "He won't," I cut in. "You said it yourself. No one has to know." He shook his head, standing from the table. "You don't understand. Secrets have weight, and this one—" He trailed off, looking toward the window. "This one could crush both of us." I stood too. "Then why did you kiss me?" He froze, his back still turned. "Because I wanted to," he said finally. "And that's exactly why I can't again." The words stuck in my chest like splinters. He left the room before I could say anything else. The rest of the day, he buried himself in work around the property, fixing fences, organizing the garage, anything to avoid me. But every now and then, I caught him glancing my way. Those brief flashes of softness, quickly masked by restraint, told me what he wouldn't say out loud. He was fighting himself. That night, my dad was called into another late shift, leaving us alone again. The same silence settled over the house. Familiar now, dangerous. I was sitting outside on the porch when Cole joined me. He didn't speak at first, just leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. His face was unreadable. "Long night?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Always." For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. The crickets filled the quiet. The cool air carried the smell of pine and rain. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer this time. "I shouldn't have talked to you like that this morning." I looked at him, surprised. "You mean when you pretended I didn't exist?" He gave a small, rueful smile. "Yeah, that. So why did you?" He hesitated. "Because it scared me, Luke. What I felt. What I still feel." The confession came out so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. He turned his head toward me. "I've spent years building walls, you know. The badge, the discipline, the rules. They were supposed to keep me in control." I met his gaze. "And I broke that control." "You didn't mean to," he said. "But yeah, you did." For a long time we just looked at each other, that silent understanding growing deeper with every second. "You said it was a mistake," I finally said. "Was that a lie?" His lips parted slightly, as if he was about to say yes. But then he stopped. "It wasn't a lie," he said carefully. "It was a mistake, but not one I regret." Something inside me eased, just a little. I smiled faintly. "You're terrible at keeping contradictions straight." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. You have no idea how right you are. The sound of his laugh broke something in me. All the fear, all the confusion. I reached out, my hand brushing his arm. Then stop fighting it, I said. Just for one night, stop pretending this isn't real. He stared at my hand, then at me. You think it's that easy? I think you make it harder than it has to be. He didn't answer, but I saw the shift in his eyes, the same one I'd seen that first night in the hallway. That war between duty and desire, Luke, he said slowly. If we do this again, there's no taking it back. You get that, right? I nodded. I already did. He exhaled, a mix of frustration and surrender. God help me. He moved closer, one hand gripping the railing beside mine. The distance between us disappeared, and I could feel his breath again, steady but heavy. You make me forget who I'm supposed to be, he whispered. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I replied. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he leaned in, his lips hovering just above mine. But instead of closing the gap, he stopped, his forehead resting against mine. I want this, he said quietly, more than I should. But I can't give you half of me, Luke. If I cross that line again, I won't stop. My heart was pounding. Then don't. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of everything he was trying not to say. And then, finally, he kissed me again, harder this time. No hesitation, no apology. The world fell away. The rules, the fear, the noise. There was only him, only us. When he finally pulled back breathless, he whispered, I don't know what's going to happen after this. I smiled faintly. Neither do I, but deep down I knew. Something had changed again. Whatever this was, it wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something dangerous, something real. And as he walked back inside, glancing over his shoulder one last time, I realized one terrifying truth. The man who was supposed to protect me had just become the one thing I couldn't live without. The storm started before sunset, thick clouds swallowing the horizon, the kind that carried both thunder and change. I remember standing by the window, watching the rain hammer the dirt road outside, feeling the same heaviness inside me that filled the air. Cole was pacing across the living room, the tension in him obvious, every step sharper than the last. He'd barely looked at me all day. Not because he didn't want to, I could feel it in the air, in the silence, but because something had shifted between us again. Something neither of us could hide anymore. Your dad's on his way home, he said finally, his voice cutting through the quiet. The storm's slowing him down, but he should be here soon. I nodded, pretending that news didn't make my chest tighten. Because it meant this. Whatever we were would go back to being a secret the moment he walked through that door. Cole rubbed a hand across his jaw, exhaling hard. We can't keep doing this, Luke. Doing what? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best effort. This, he said, motioning between us. Whatever this is, it's not fair to you. It's not right for me. I laughed softly, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. You say that every time you start feeling something. He looked up sharply. Don't what? Tell the truth? I took a step closer, the sound of rain drowning out my heartbeat. You're scared. That's what this is. You think if you keep hiding behind your uniform, your guilt, your rules, none of it will be real. But it already is, Cole. You already crossed the line. He clenched his fists at his sides. You think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every night, replaying that moment in the kitchen, that look in your eyes? His voice cracked on the last word. You have no idea what that does to me. Then tell me, I said softly, stepping closer still. Tell me what it does. For a long time, he didn't say a word. The storm outside grew louder, flashes of lightning painting his face in harsh light. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, broken. It makes me feel alive again, he said. And that scares the hell out of me. Something in me broke hearing that. I moved closer until there was barely an inch of space between us. Then stop being afraid. His eyes searched mine, filled with everything he wanted to say but couldn't. He reached up, his fingers brushing my jaw. You don't understand what it's like to carry this much guilt. Every choice I've made, every mistake, every person I couldn't save, they all stick with me. You're the first thing that's made me forget. My heart was beating so fast, I thought he could hear it. Then maybe that's what you need. He exhaled, his breath trembling. And what if what I need ruins you? It won't, I said. It already saved me. That was the moment something inside him snapped. The wall he'd been building since the day he put on that badge. It cracked right there in front of me. He pulled me into him, like he'd been holding back for years, his arms wrapping around me so tightly I could barely breathe. The world outside disappeared. There was no storm, no past, no fear, just the warmth of his body against mine, the rhythm of his heart beneath my hand. For once he didn't pull away, but then headlights swept across the living room wall. My dad's truck. Cole froze. I felt his breath hitch, and before I could say anything, he stepped back. The look in his eyes changed instantly. Fear, guilt, panic. "Luke," he said, voice sharp now. "Go upstairs." "What?" "No, now." The command in his tone made me flinch. I hesitated, my throat tightening, but the sound of the front door opening made my heart drop. My dad's voice echoed through the hall. "Cole, you here?" Cole straightened, running a hand through his hair. By the time my dad entered the room, he looked calm. Too calm. "There you are," my dad said, shaking off rain. "Hell of a storm out there." He glanced at me on the stairs. "You okay, kid?" I nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't notice the tension in the air. He couldn't. He talked for a while, about work, about the storm knocking down trees, while Cole nodded, answering with polite, distant words. But I could see it, the tremor in his hands, the way he wouldn't look at me. Later that night, after my dad went to bed, I found him outside by his car, standing under the rain. The badge on his chest glistened in the dim light, and he looked like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't climb down from. "You're leaving," I said. It wasn't a question. He turned, rain dripping from his hair, eyes tired and red. "I have to." "Why?" "Because you kissed me. Because you felt something human. Because if I stay," he said, his voice breaking, "I'll stop pretending I'm not yours." My chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Then don't pretend, please." He shook his head. "You deserve more than a man who hides." I stepped closer, tears burning in my eyes. "You said I made you feel alive." He nodded slowly. "You did. You still do. That's why I have to go before I destroy that part of you." I couldn't breathe. The rain was cold against my skin, but nothing compared to the ache in my chest. "So that's it?" I asked. "You just walk away." He reached out, cupping the back of my neck, his thumb trembling against my skin. "If I stay, I'll never let you go." "Then don't." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were full of everything he'd never say. He leaned in and kissed me, one last time. Deep, desperate, full of everything we'd never have words for. When he pulled away, his voice was barely audible. "You'll see me again, just not like this." And then he was gone. The sound of the engine faded into the night, leaving only rain and silence behind. I stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness. Somewhere inside me I knew he wasn't lying. Maybe someday our paths would cross again, older, freer, no rules left to break. But until that day I carried his words with me. "You made me feel alive." And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes love doesn't need forever to change you. Sometimes one storm is all it takes.